Welcome to episode 6 of a collection of spaces. This one is with my new studio next door neighbour, I guess you could call him, Tanguy from Varylab. So Tanguy and I spent the morning at his new studio space in Peckham chatting about discovering art and graphic design at school while pushing away from the formal education in Switzerland where he grew up. He recently moved in across the corridor from me, and it's been a nice fresh element coming into the workshop to have someone with the energy in what they're creating and a focus on discovery that feels really exciting. He moved to London 8 years ago, studying at UAL in Camberwell in what seemed like a transition period for the institution, and this allowed both Tanguy and his fellow students the freedom to explore processes, techniques, and this is also something that he really continues with in his studio today. In recent years, the direction of the studio is focused around screen printing onto fabrics, while recently exploring embroidery and bag making. From buying old sewing machines, travelling to the heart of England's fabric mills in Yorkshire, and selling his wares across London's weekly markets. Of course, we touch on communities, as we always do, around skateboarding especially. So skateboarding, discovering graffiti, exploring urban environments, and of course the places that this opens up, the places and people that this opens up around the world outside of our front door. Listening back to the conversation left me feeling inspired to how I see my own workshop and studio, and trying to push beyond just what is a commercial space, I guess, and channel his excitement for techniques and materials, pushing just beyond the ideas and skills that you currently have to hand. I hope you enjoy this conversation with myself and Tanguy from Varylab. Let's do this. Do you want to just give us an introduction to where we are now, like geographically, and also, like, I know you're across the hallway from me, so I know like how long you've been here. Like you've been here maybe 2 or 3 months. But what spaces were you in before this? And again, you were just across the car park. But how long were you there? And how has like this move? How's it been, kind of thing? Moving into what was, I think, a bigger space, like more floor space, in that way.
So I guess I arrived in southeast London because I started studying at Camberwell Uni in 2016.
Yeah.
I studied graphics, and then I was literally living around the corner from here on Belendon Road for 3 years.
Yeah.
Which was at the time, I guess, not as trendy yet as it is now.
Yeah.
About 8 years ago, but I could feel like, somehow as also like part of something happening in the area.
Yeah.
Which we could, definitely call gentrification. And so after living there for 3 years, graduated, and I specialized into screen printing at uni. This meant that I started to accumulate some materials and a printing carousel. And when I finished in 2019, in the meantime, we changed campus. Again, like the area kind of evolved quite a lot into something that was, a bit more creative. Like Southeast London Gallery started expanding. The campus changed. They started to have accommodations and stuff. And I could see my rent going up throughout the whole kind of like, my whole time at uni, which was kind of weird.
Yeah.
But yeah, moved to Print Village on Chadwick Road, where we are now, 5.5 years ago now.
Yeah.
And it was this little studio. I had so much stuff to kind of, bring to my house that I was like, I need to find an alternative to this. I can't have a printing carousel and, screen printing screens in my room. So luckily someone was moving out of a shared studio in Unit 10.
Yeah.
And it was a sculptor, and I just, went to visit, and I was like, yeah, I'm super interested, especially it was like pretty low rent because it was shared by 3. It was very tiny though, like 178 square feet, shared with 3 people, with 2 other people. And it was just, covered in resin and concrete and like dust, but there was a sink, so there was water, and I saw that and I was like, well, that's gonna be it, because I do need a source of water for screen printing. And obviously decided to move in while having a full-time job back in the days. And so the juggle was quite interesting because I was like really trying to specialize, then, kind of get my printing game get better. and commissions after commissions. Like one person kind of moved out the studio, I expanded to his spot.
Yeah.
And then because of Brexit, the third one moved out. And that happened over maybe like 2 years.
Yeah.
So I really had the time to kind of get a feeling around, can I actually expand?
Yeah.
While being employed as well. And
was that related? What your job, was it related to what?
It was an
design?
e-commerce platform. It's for Parade that doesn't exist anymore.
Okay. So a skate shop.
A skate shop.
Yeah.
And so I was there, sort of like all over, graphic designer kind of thing. Yeah, literally a bit of everything. Lots of gifts. And yeah, I learned a lot through Craig Smith. That was, you know, the boss of the company. With Ches, that was based in Amsterdam. And yeah, it was really interesting. It was very techy because these guys came from tech, and he was like, you know, he was at Skype and Burberry kind of e-commerce platform as well before. Yeah. And I learned a lot around, you know, strategizing and kind of, you know, campaigns and pace of things, and, you know, like the reality of, you know, Black Friday and all of these things. And Google Analytics, although I was not in charge of that part, it was very interesting to see as a literally freshly graduated student.
Did they like could like other shops sell on there?
The concept was they were just representing skate stores across the US and the UK. Originally only the UK, and then expanded to the US. Okay. And they were taking commissions on sales without stocking anything. Yeah. So you could just browse a huge catalog of products without, you know, really feeling restricted, and then you'd place an order across 3 different stores without even knowing that would be 3 different stores, and then each store would ship. Yeah. So it was, you know, very interesting model. For some reason, they stopped.
Kind of thing that you'd probably be able to sell like the system behind it
fully
to someone else.
And it's all based on Shopify as well.
Yeah.
So
it's like basically an app, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. And then, you know, COVID happened, and that was like skyrocketing for the company, because the UK was not so well, but in the US they received this sort of like, you know, upfront money compensation, and everyone kept on shopping in the US. So and stopped going to stores, so they were online shopping and stuff. So that was really, really interesting as a kind of, you know, business model. But obviously I was kind of driven by my practice as well. So jumped on UC, and, you know, and then kind of tried to, you know, plan what was coming next, if there was anything coming next after COVID. But yeah, I had the studio, and I could, like, you know, kind of specialize and experiment and print for people. And luckily, like, a few people really trusted me for, you know, my skills and my attention to detail, and like trying to make things good. And this really helps, like, sustained the financial side, but also, like, at the start of a business, you need, you know, self-confidence. Yeah. And you need to think that you can eventually make it. And so it worked here and there. It was still very, like, you know, marketing-wise, and like there was very little awareness around it. And I didn't go full-on commercial because I wanted to build some sort of audience that was kind of understanding what was behind
as
it.
As in the screen printing, but you didn't just want to be like,
because you could literally
printing football shirts for someone. It's
you
like,
could go to literally like plumbers and
and they're just like,
you know,
automated machine, do 1,000 and
exactly, and you know, trades, like all of them have fleece with like embroidered and screen printed t-shirts and things that, you know, but that was not really the route I wanted to go down to, because of I wanted to work with creatives that were like also inspiring me, and I wanted that to be some sort of exchange rather than like a one-way conversation where I just provide a service. On the other hand, it was really interesting because providing a service is bound to a space, and that's something that's, I think, helped me since day one to feel comfortable and mentally healthy when it came to my practice, because you know it as well. As someone that works with materials, you can only do that in your space. And then you get home, and no matter how much you regret what you've done today or how much you screwed up something, there's nothing you can do about it, because it's in your space. So you'll deal with it tomorrow. And that means that you've got proper separation and you can sleep well. It's true. Like, as a graphic designer originally, you know, I've done logos, I've done identities, I've done, you know, plenty of creative graphic things.
Yeah.
And these things chase you. You know, a computer's dangerous because
Yeah.
it follows you home. And you open it
It
back
kind of
up,
never
and
ends in that
it
way.
never
Whereas,
ends.
like,
It never ends. And you wanna start watching Netflix, and you wanna start, like, you know, doing your fun time, and and you just end up, you know, going down that spiral of creative pressure. So yeah, I think I got really satisfied by this idea, and then obviously over time, yeah, you just get better at what you're doing, and you can smash, like, you know, 50, 100 Ts like much faster than what you originally used to.
Yeah. Well, it take you like a whole day to do 10, and now you do 100.
Yeah, and then the
Same
screen
period of
setup,
time,
and you know, things become sharper, and obviously it takes a lot of time, and up to, you know, until July I was part-time employed.
Yeah.
So it's juggling as well with, you know, external pressures and schedule. Like, time management has never been something that I, like, mastered. I love to work overnight as well, and I did ask you for this to happen a bit later in the day.
It's all good.
Because I'm not the sharpest in the morning.
Yeah.
But I'm really sharp at night.
Once you get going.
Yeah, once I get going, but also once things get dark. I'm, like, very sensitive to light, and so I feel like as the day goes by, things get quieter.
Yeah.
And you can really bracket a light onto what you want to focus on.
Okay.
And that's why now we are, like, talking with the main neon lights on.
Yeah.
But the studio is kind of
like,
filled with little
Okay,
lamps and bedside table kind of vibe.
Yeah.
And that's the way I like
Ambient
to work.
light, I guess.
Ambient, but very focused, really targeted. Because otherwise I just end up, like, scanning the whole room and be like, oh, I can do this and I can do that. And like, oh my God,
focus.
this is, like, out of balance. And yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Did you have a studio at uni?
Um,
Did you have, like, a little space or anything?
Yeah,
Like
so as I mentioned, we went through some sort of interesting threshold with Camberwell, because we moved in and it was the old Camberwell campus.
Okay.
So there was no security gates, there was, you know, there was no fancy sort of security things, and in the second year we moved from what used to be the old library, our new graphic design studios. So they refurbished an entire building, added a new one, which meant the canteen was in a different place. Like, they just rejigged everything. And this meant that it was our first year being in spaces with no rules, because they had no idea how we would approach the space.
Yeah.
And obviously, you know, they forgot that although we were studying graphic design, we were all kind of art driven. And I think Camberwell is really has this strong fine art kind of identity. And although they really tried, and they still trying today, to kind of, you know, restrict what a graphic design studio should look like. It should be, you know, there should be no paint on the wall, there should be no marks, it should be all white and lino, and, you know, no scratches on the table. And you go to, like, the fine art painting students rooms, and it's just absolutely trashed with, like, you know, health and hazard things like going on in all sides of the room. So I think it's really, they really tried to make this a graphic design studio, but we arrived and we just, like, took ownership of the space. And there was obviously, like, little groups of, you know, students that were always in, and they had something called, like, a little room called the makerspace. And this eventually became, like, our studios as well.
Oh, nice.
And we're not hot desking at the time, although they were, like, trying to push us to hot desk and to not have, like, stations. We had stations.
Yeah.
And there are, like, a few pictures of, you know, my studio with, like, literally, I don't know, like 300 pictures on the wall of, like, inspiration stuff, and, you know, like, references and things. Boot Boys Biz, which was, like, you know, t-shirt printers from New York that were doing crazy stuff at the time, like selling out hard. And yeah, these were, like, very interesting kind of moments, because it felt like our rooms.
Yeah.
You know, it felt like it was we were skating in the studio as well, like, you know, it was like kind of
Yeah.
a bit trashed, although it was brand new.
Yeah.
You know, and this felt great. And later on, I came back when I finished uni, like maybe a couple years later, to kind of chat to the students about my experience as a sort of freshly graduate.
Yeah.
And I was showing them pictures of the space, and there's you know, I won't mention names, but there was the, you know, head of graphics that was at the back of the studio, like crossing me out, being like, don't show that,
Yeah,
because they can't do that anymore. And I was like, yeah, whatever, but it stays inspiring, I think, for everyone to feel like, you know, you don't have to take ownership of the space, but you should still be able to get a bit messy.
Yeah.
'Cause I
Interesting
think,
how that evolution changed, like over you being there, and then maybe you went back 2 years later, and that's not allowed. And they said then it is just.
But I
become
think
like
it's
a
never been
design
allowed. They
studio
just
kind of thing.
they didn't voice it at the start
Yeah.
because they didn't know it would go down
Yeah, in
that
that
sort
way.
of, yeah, exactly.
But yeah, like you mentioned Tammy before, and like I studied photography as well, and we didn't have a space. But, and I would always look at like the fine artists that had even just like a 1 meter desk, like really small space, and they're sticking stuff on the wall.
Yeah.
Like that, we had that in our living rooms kind of
Yeah,
thing,
yeah.
but not like at uni.
Fully.
It always felt like a bit of a shame to not have that. 'Cause
Yeah, fully.
you're just looking over at someone else working on something rather than
And
outside of a class. It is a class, but it's outside of the main class framework in that way. It's kind of
totally. And I also feel like it's a time in your life where, I mean, it's already a privilege to, you know, to attend uni and go there and be able to spend 3 years of your life kind of learning and meeting new people and attending shows. But it feels at the time that you kind of know what you want to do already. And, you know, you put yourself in a sort of like pedestal, like thinking that everything's worked out and that you're already like a great artist of some sort.
Did you have a moment where that kind of came, like, not crashing down, but like where like you're in that zone for like 3 years, and then it like ends, and you're like, okay.
Yeah, for me it was Camberwell was kind of sadly though, because I wish I explored more the conceptual approach and the research, and, you know, sitting down and read and go to shows, and we did that. But I also arrived at Camberwell, and luckily I had a really nice cohort of people, you know, Charlie, Adela, Beatrice, and Izzo, and Harry, and really lucky the group I fell into, because that helped, you know, everything to feel like you have good peers to work with and stuff. But yeah, I arrived with some sort of very strong-minded, I don't know, like I was doing a lot of graffiti before that and like murals and things, and it was very visual driven, and I had some kind of style, which I kind of like closed myself into. And I think this was like, you know, like a blessing and a curse, because I arrived with something to explore techniques with, but I didn't really reconsider this aesthetic and this like visual approach. And this actually helped me to, you know, dive into screen printing, because rather than trying to work out an artwork for weeks, just draw something, go, and then, you know, have a 6 colors print ready to go. And Brian from screen printing, which is, you know, over 3 years, like at the end he was bored. He was like, he was seeing me every week coming back with a different artwork. I was asking to like expose my own screens and to work things myself, to, you know, to reclaim them, pressure washer, like, you know, to really be independent in that process. And yeah, my last, you know, my graduation kind of project was like to screen print patches and then assemble them onto clothes and stuff. And I had like dozens of screens to do. And I was just like, I was going there during lunch breaks because there would be no technicians, and I knew I had like an hour slot to like coat 20 screens and dry them and expose and blast, and then everything would be just looking as smooth as when they left. You know, switching off everything back into like exactly how it was. And yeah, I can't remember what was the original question.
It doesn't matter.
But yeah, Camberwell. That was a great.
I guess you were saying you had like a very fixed side. You came in with like a background in like graphics and graffiti. You're like, this is my style. I'm just gonna do it here, kind of thing, rather than being really open to whatever it is.
Yeah, get lost.
Yeah. Not gonna say you're doing interpretive dance, but like,
no, fully.
Yeah, trying to. Yeah, you're like, this is what I'm about.
Yeah, and you see it because I was teaching assistant, and then later on, kind of visiting practitioner, like going to Camberwell to make workshops with the students, and you really see that spirit. Like you talk with like first and second years, and they're so sure about what they do, and you're like I'm pretty convinced I was like that too.
Yeah.
But it's kind of bad. You know? It's like, hey, like
it's kind of good.
Come
it's
back down.
Sides.
You know, it's like you know you've got so much to try.
Yeah.
And I think that's what really got me into Camberwell was the workshops.
Yeah.
And the technicians. You know, I love the teaching, but I'm not that academic.
No.
I'm really like hands-on and interaction with materials and things. And yeah, I just love this side of Camberwell. Just, doing some darkroom processing and photography, and like going to the metal workshop, and then going to wood workshop, and then just like juggling with
different things.
Yeah, and materials and mediums.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, like that's why I'm here today. It's like seeing all of these things come together, and you create some sort of like vision of a world that's yours. You don't really like, oh, that's my dream of like, I want to be exhibited in that gallery, or I want to make this, or I want to, ideally one day I want to build a house. That's all I want to do. But that involves a lot of, different trades.
Yeah, just like learning.
And yeah, exactly. And aesthetics and combining design with craft and, engineering and all of these things coming together. It's like, that's the goal of a life. But that's being independent from society as well. That comes from maybe that at the end of the day. But yeah.
But you grew up in Switzerland?
I did grow up in Switzerland in Geneva, very close to the French border.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had you done any
pretty much?
Like before you came to London, did you like study any graphic design then? Or was that straight from like school, or?
So our system is slightly different.
To go to Camberwell kind of thing?
Yeah, our system is slightly different from here. We don't have GCSEs, but we have something called maturity, which is like baccalaureate type diploma, and we don't specialize as much as you guys do here.
No.
So we study a lot of things, like including all kind of subjects until the very end. But yeah, when you go to high school, you can pick up some options, and there is like complementary option and specific option. Yeah. And complementary is just like 2 hours per week or something, and I had like psychology, and then specific option, I basically retook my first year high school because I arrived and we have to choose between 2 national languages. So we study French because we're in the French part. Yeah. And obviously Switzerland speaks like French, Italian and German, and then the Romanche, which is a dialect. But I picked up German because German part is the biggest one. And if you want to go creative, which I kind of already was at the time, I was drawing a lot and like, again, like graffiti, and then retook my first year because of German. And I changed for Italian, and I changed from the other option was Spanish, and I changed Spanish for art.
Yeah.
And this like changed my life. I was like, oh yeah, it's feeling a bit more accurate because I've never really like been a good student. Yeah. I already felt, high school just started. I felt at a place kind of thing. I was like, am I really in the right, place here? And even the teachers were telling my mum like, oh yeah, like, this is not the right spot for your kid.
Yeah.
And I was like, dude, like, I'm so stubborn that like, the more you tell my mum this and that, the more I'm gonna stick around. And I'm gonna like, make sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I'm gonna make sure I graduate just to like, kind of say fuck you.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a bit of a tough time, and obviously when you retake, you've got this like kind of pride in things, and but it was actually one of the best things that's ever happened, really, because I could readjust. I was with like slightly younger people. So I was like a bit calmer, and there's a lot of things I studied already. So I was like drawing twice as much. I
Yeah.
was like engraving the desks and things. And, like, with the compass and
Yeah.
and kind of this art kind of option was really good because every year you would have another hour. So we had sculpture, drawing, and history of art.
Yeah.
And each year we'd have another hour per week. So it's like 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, 3, 2, 3, 3, and then by the end of the 3 or 4 years, you have 9 hours a week of art.
Yeah.
And so this was really, although I was not that good at it, it was like
You're
a
just
space
interested in it, and you like
fully,
learning. Yeah,
and
it doesn't
work
matter
out
what
materials and clay and draw and paint and like and history of art. The more you would go through school, the more you would go recent in history of art.
Okay.
So by the 4th year of school, you're like studying Dada and like surrealism and like
modern.
fully, and that really resonated with what art was as a how conceptual it can go, but also how kind of a joke about society it can be, and it doesn't have to be classicism or like the big masters with missing and like funding and all that stuff. It'd be like groups of friends just like fucking around, but making really clever artworks, making statements about who we are as as a society as well. And I think that really resonated, and then I was like, okay, cool, I think I'm going to study something along those lines. And I always I already thought at the time like art is great, but I didn't think I want to dive into fine art, because fine art I can always do it myself. I don't really need theoretical knowledge. This might be true, or not. I don't know. Like some people might disagree.
Yeah,
with
I feel
that.
like it's very theoretical, like fine art in that way, compared to like graphics.
Yeah, I mean, you'd be surprised because there's still
I guess you
things.
can study anything really to any degree, no matter what it is.
Yeah, and I think it really depends where you study it.
Yeah,
and that's why at the time I was still in Switzerland, I was not really fitting in the kind of
because very
like education process.
Yeah.
It's like very elite based. It's like, you're going to be good at maths or French or philosophy or whatever. You're going to be able to do great things in your life.
Yeah.
And this is something that really like comes through in a lot of, in a lot of places. But, the moment I sat down with a teacher that was kind of understanding where I came from with all of that energy, with all of that curiosity, with all of that like, chit-chatting with like everyone, and I don't know, like, a lot of energy.
Yeah.
But not actually so bound to like theory and reading books and that. And so when they sat down with me, I was like, this is great. Like, this is what I want. I actually want not one-to-ones, but I want conversation. I don't want authority. And that's why I started looking at the UK, because I knew that like, the education kind of process was, from what I understood at the time, a bit different. And we're saying like, oh yeah, fine art can't really be theoretical. If you go to Beaux-Arts de Paris and you study painting in Paris, you're going to have like 2 years, if not more, of sketching things, of using charcoal and using oil and using like, it's very theoretical.
Yeah.
But for me, by theoretical, I also kind of understand commercial. It's like, oh yeah, I've got those tools now. I can like go to an employer and say, right, I've studied design. I know this and that about typography and fucking typesetting. Yeah. Like, have me in. You know what I mean? It's like, so that's, like joining the lines. And so, yeah, I thought, okay, maybe I'm going to do a foundation year in graphic design. No, in Switzerland.
Okay.
And I mean, I was tempted to come here, but we didn't really have the money to kind of like, fund a foundation year here. Yeah. And so I applied. There was like a grant going from my council, like a cultural grant or whatever.
Because Switzerland seemed, from an outside perspective, like places like Akal and stuff like that. Like that seems like the dream to like go, like when I was doing photography, like to go there, and then we knew like Swiss photographers that were getting grants, and like I stay with people in Amsterdam that were getting grants from the Swiss government. It just seemed like the Swiss government were just giving grants out to everyone, whether that was just a period in time or whatever it was. But for photography or graphic design, but yeah, like going to a cow was, for me and my friends, was, oh, that'd be amazing. Like, that's kind of the ultimate in that way. So it's kind of interesting that like, you came of it from the other way. Like going to London was maybe the dream in that way.
Yeah, I think I wasn't even that aware of a cow being maybe not really for me either at the time. And I'm not saying that a cow is bad, but I think it really just represents exactly why I left and the feeling I had at school already. You know, it's like you just, you know, you just kind of nothing. You just like, it's never kind of good. And I'm not, you know, I didn't study there. But I've had a lot of ecos and from what I understand, it's an amazing university, but it's a pretty toxic environment as well, because it's so elite. It's like, from what I understand, is if you fit into their sort of criterias, then you're gonna get represented. You're gonna get pushed, and you're gonna get like highlighted, and you know.
But then if you're on the edge of that, you just drift away.
And it's just a little bubble, and I think that really feeds into like what Switzerland is as well. It's a ecosystem, pretty privileged as well by the size, by the economy, by its, you know, geographical place in Europe as well. And I think it's just like it lives in a world that like a lot of people, you know, don't even kind of understand, and I think it's maybe the case when you graduate there as well. It's like you're gonna have a great job, but you're not gonna have a global outreach so much. Like we don't know of a lot of, you know, cultural kind of Swiss entities. We know museums and we know, you know, universities and things, but you know, on the kind of like global stage, there are not that many, you know, Swiss artists and Swiss designers. There are, but you know what I mean? It's like, I feel like it's a little ecosystem that kind of looks into itself kind of thing. And there are loads of, you know, if you study at a car, then you're likely to work for this or that office or that design studio. And I think it struggles a little bit with outreach, because it solves a lot of problem within Switzerland. And you know, we still have billboards, and we still have like posters in the street, and you know, there's a graphic design scene. There's a scene for everything, really, and it's great, and it's massively funded as well, as you said, which is great. But sometimes it just addresses things that like don't feel as accurate as the challenges that the rest of the world faces. And I'm not saying that, you know, everyone should try to address, you know, issues that everyone has, or that certain countries or certain places or certain communities have, but I think you should be aware of it, or you know. And I'm saying this still as, you know, a white Swiss dude based in Peckham that's like, you know, has
ticking boxes.
Exactly, no, but you know, I think it's still a matter of like.
Well, it's just an interesting perspective.
And also be aware of certain issues, and and I think like interacting and exchanging and I don't know, like building communities around certain things. And
Because did you like skate when you were younger?
Yeah, I did.
So I guess like skating, graffiti, you're like looking at like other cities for like inspiration and like the community. Like
I think what was really like an eye opener was when I did this foundation year. So I finished high school, and then I applied for some grants to have a foundation year funded, and they didn't give me the full fund. So I told my guy at the foundation year, like, I'm not going to be able to literally study the whole foundation year. I'm going to leave in May, because obviously UCAS for British universities, or like, you know, UAL was deadline kind of February. And I was like, what's the point of like, you know, studying until June when like in February I know or not if I'm like being
see you later.
Yeah, exactly.
I've got them in.
So that was a bit cheeky, but yeah, I left in May, and then I did a show in Geneva selling like prints and paintings and things, and that actually kind of funded a trip to South America.
Oh, wow.
And I went to South America for 2 months. I did like Peru, Ecuador, Colombia.
Yeah.
And that was very graffiti driven. So I reached out to Andes from Lima Love, which is, you know, a graffiti crew in Lima. And I just landed there and I was like, you know, I saw this guy for 2 weeks and, you know, again, like this idea of community building. And it was not so much through skate, but like graffiti had this really strong feeling of like literally regardless of who you are and where you come from.
I think they're very
you can,
similar.
like, yeah,
in
yeah,
that
yeah,
way.
exactly.
Yeah, I think they overlap.
You can just like, you know, bond.
Yeah.
And then Bogota was the same thing. Quito was the same thing. Like painted pretty decent walls. Had a lot of fun and, you know, learned a bit of Spanish. And then I came back and I was accepted at Camberwell.
Yeah.
And I also applied to St. Martin's, and I think they said no straight away. Like, they didn't even give me like a physical interview.
Yeah.
And I was pretty gutted. I was like, hey, like, what's going on? Like, I thought I was okay at it. And then, you know, that was just a blessing because Camberwell was a great fit.
Yeah.
But yeah, just came back and then you know, could go study Camberwell, and yeah, that was great.
Yeah. I guess even again, like moving from Switzerland to England, not a huge jump, but you are again a part of those communities, and even like going to South America, you can interact with people around that one subject, and you can like do that here as well.
Entirely.
Yeah.
And then I think it gives you. I mean, graffiti also came from like curiosity around like architecture and you know, urbanism and like trying to go in places where you can't go, and you know, the very early times of like urbex and you know, just going to
places,
exactly abandoned buildings, and you know, I think that really kind of came from that. You know, seeing like huge concrete walls that were like just fresh in a derelict building. I was like, this is a playground. You know what I mean? Like, this is a place where you can like, if you want, throw buckets of paint at a wall and just like have no one telling you anything. This becomes your space for a matter of a day. And this was really like, you know, this idea of independence and yeah, creative drive with no border. I was like, wow, like this is liberation. This is what true freedom feels like. And then obviously there is like the feeling of degradation and, you know, like breaking things and, you know, not everyone shares the idea of graffiti being like, you know, beautiful and nice. But I think it's beyond the point. It's like, you know, it's very like sometimes ego-centered and like, you know, self-centered because you think of your freedom and your well-being and your kind of creative expansion. But you know,
because you don't do it so much like nowadays.
Nah, not so much.
Do you feel like your feeling on it is like evolved from like when you used to do it?
No, it's
still the same.
I think like literally tonight I could just spend like hours and, you know, do it again. But yeah, I feel like London didn't have like the same kind of drive or the same kind of impact on me. Like, it's so surveilled that, you know, in Europe or in Italy, in Spain, in a lot of countries, abandoned places are just abandoned. No one would go live in it. And I felt like London, I just arrived to a place where everything was ultra, you know, there was security dogs on building sites.
And just, like, sitting there,
Exactly. And that was really tough. Because there was no more playgrounds. And then when I arrived, I spent quite a lot of time in Lewisham Canal, just going with the wellies and like, you know, that was great because I was a peace haven. That was like, and I was still painting walls at a time. And I moved from like, you know, spray cans and heavy fumes and solvents to like a lot of roller because it was more peaceful, more discreet, less, you know, bad smells and things. But yeah, not so much anymore. Although, you know, might pick up again one day. And there's still a lot of respect.
You still got the energy for it, but not
fully. And I still have a lot of friends that, you know, do trains and travel for that.
Yeah.
And you know, again, this community aspect is insane.
Yeah.
It's you can literally tour the world, you know.
Cool. When you were saying about doing, I guess, funding that trip to South America, like doing the show after your foundation, like you've done similar things like that. Like you did one in Brockley like a couple of years ago, like a group show.
Yeah.
Do you enjoy like doing those things?
I think there was a slightly different context because in Switzerland, I did shows that were very much around my like fine art practice, and it was a lot of like drawing and painting. Whereas like in London, we had one show where I had like Mona prints with my friend Charlie Carvey. He was making rugs for that show, and I feel like things have changed in the commercial pressure. Like when you study, you have this sort of like, you know, you find the money somehow and you book a spot, and then, or you just borrow, and then what you sell is going to pay back for the space. And I feel like here, after graduating, there was like the intense reality of trying to make things work. And so that show in Brockley was not so much about my own work, but it was printing for like 37 different creatives in London.
Yeah.
And then they were all like friends and friends of friends, and you know, paying them for the t-shirts they sold, and just kind of breaking even for my printing process and the rental of the space, which we did, which was amazing. You know, like redistributing money, small amounts of money indeed, but you know, to everyone after like running a store for a month. I finished, I was like, that's it, I'm gonna have a store, you know. And obviously like 2 or 3 years later, still no stores, but you know. But you know, it's like, again, like building a little place for your you know, in this time, like not your art, but like your practice.
It's like a public space where people can interact with you.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
You've just been doing stuff like through the web. So before that, were you selling things just through the website a little bit?
Yeah.
And then you did that show, and then did it evolve from there? Like in terms of like Varylabs as the brand?
Yeah, I think there was the reality.
What's like the timeline of that?
Yeah, I think there was the reality of the audience. Like in Switzerland, since very early, I was doing so much graffiti and so much drawing and stuff. Like I kind of had, people were seeing me as the guy that draws and, you know, do those things.
A little following,
And then I arrived in London and suddenly, like, you know, I had no friend. I moved to here, I literally knew no one.
You're like, does no one know who I am?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm this guy.
Well, yeah, or like, you know, even just in terms of graffiti name and stuff, you know, you come from like a small town, like, you know the game, everyone knows your name, and, you know people's name, and, you know, that's just like what the graffiti is about as well. But yeah, I arrived here and he was like, right, okay, this is going to be a tough one. So you have to, you know, work around different challenges as well, in terms of spaces and recognition, and then I felt like the market, or just the art market in general, was so saturated. In a good way though, like so many galleries and so many like great artists with, you know, amazing shows going on, talks and events, and like it's extremely inspiring. And I just arrived at that space and I was like, all right, like I think what I do is like aesthetically kind of cool, but like it's lacking, you know, and I have a lot to learn still. And that's why I decided to dive into, you know, technical things, because I was like, actually, technical things can inform the way I think, you know, and I can think with a purpose, with a finality, and with some sort of like aesthetic in mind, which really happened. And then during COVID, we shot so much, like with my friend Matthias and Charlie, and we just went around and we just took so many pictures, and then I was processing them. And, you know, rows and rows and rows, and like scanning and altering and, you know, printing, and that was just, amazing time. But I think having so much going on and being so curious about things, it really got me kind of lost into like, oh yeah, I was doing shows, making paintings and prints, but like, what do I want to do now? I want to do everything kind of thing, you know what I mean? And I was like, okay, this is cool, but I know for a fact that the creative industry and the industry in general comes to people and hires people and commissions people that have a really strong approach on one thing, and that have a style, and that have something that got successful. And a lot of people just, get recognized for one thing they've done. And sometimes they get asked to do these things and to remake and to, and I'm like, fuck, like even 8 years later after arriving in London, it's still pretty undefined, and we are here today in this new studio that I've moved in August, literally across the parking lot from the old one. But that is still very much of a sort of modular space. It can become anything you want. You can pretty much do anything in here. Like you can paint, you can print, you can embroider, you can sew, you can just sit down, do nothing.
Yeah. What do you do the most of in here at the moment? In those like past 4 months? Or?
Bags for sure. Yeah. And when you look back, it's interesting because we talk about kind of back in the days and like where I come from and stuff, and I didn't think during those times I would have told you like, oh yeah, I'm really gonna be into making bags.
Yeah, buying sewing machines. You got like 3 sewing machines.
Yeah. Well, slow build up.
4.
Yeah.
I can see.
Yeah.
Because with that, is that just like a process of just learning, like watching YouTube, trying stuff?
Not even watching YouTube,
Just giving it a go.
Yeah, entirely. I think it's again this idea of like having the studio, and obviously coming from screen printing and from illustration and drawing and photography. I was like, whoa, this is gonna all come together under the umbrella of screen printing. What can I screen print on?
Yeah.
Like, I was not so inspired by the art world because I felt like it was tapping into like the elite, like unique artworks, galleries. You go freeze, you go to like cool galleries, everything is just like crazy prices.
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, it's cool, but like I want to sell artworks to my friends. That's where I come from. I was making exhibitions in Geneva, like little events, selling my things. It was not like peak buyers coming through. It was like friends, buying my things and supporting because they recognized my eye and they were like seeing me work until like 3 a.m. on a Monday night. And like, you know what I mean? It's like, and that's what I wanted to pursue. Like going into print for me was like a democratic kind of approach to art. It's like you're making something multiplied, and you're making it more available and more affordable as well. And then I was like, paper's cool, but I don't know, it's like it's too printers like. It's like, paper is really, you have to have a regular temperature in the room when you screen print, because if you register a color and then the next color is a different temperature, or humidity level in the room, your paper is going to react and distort.
Just start to crinkle.
Exactly. Okay. And so your registration for the blue, the yellow, and the green that you're going to have on there, it's not going to match the same because your paper's expanded and shrinked.
Yeah, but with fabric, that's not an issue. Not so
for
much
fabric is you print all colors at once.
Yeah.
So paper, you're going to print 100 sheets with yellow, put it on a rack, let it dry. Day after, bring the sheets back, print the blue. Yeah. And it's a long haul process. It's like, well, I don't know if I've got the patience. And paper beds, printing beds take huge amount of space. So it's like, carousel is quite interesting. There is something about clothes that I love and always loved. And it, I can bring my photos, I can bring my graphics, I can bring my paintings onto a t-shirt, I can sell it. Like it just started to all kind of make sense. And then on top of that, I can provide a service. Yeah. So, the service pays for the fun I'm having, for the space, and then, I can work next to it, and, at the end of the day,
and you're
it
like
stays all
learning
balanced.
from
exactly.
Like the things, if you're just doing one-off
t-shirts. And people pay me to learn. Really? Like, people like the studio, like the vibe, they come through and like, oh yeah, this is great. Yeah. Like here is, 400 quid to like print that many t-shirts. And you have to find the blanks. And originally, like, at the start, you go fruit of the loom, gilding, like you go with the basic things. And then slowly you start like having clients with bigger budgets and larger amounts, and you know they want samples and they want to come through, they want to document, they want to,
Yeah.
So you learn so much with people, although they come to you thinking that you've got everything sorted already.
Yeah.
And it's like, I think it's a lot of creatives are like that, and a lot of people just learn on the law.
Yeah, just figuring it out. And someone's like, "Can you do this?" And you're like,
I can't, but I can.
Just like searching, like, how do you do it, or like
Entirely.
figuring it out in that way.
Yeah. So yeah, it's just started to make so much sense. Screen printing was the way to go, and
Also, you can use it. It's not just something stuck on a wall. Like if it's on a t-shirt or it's a bag,
yeah,
you can like use it out as well. It's
fully.
not. It has like two uses in that way.
Yeah,
It's like bringing a lot of things together.
Yeah, I think a lot of people. This is, and I'm still running manual. Like 5 years later, still hand pulled. But a lot of people don't quite understand the process behind it, and it's extremely physical.
Yeah.
So it's about the setup, but once you've got your screens ready, it's one print equal, so one color print equal about 2 pulls, with a lot of pressure with your shoulders, and it's extremely physical, which means you can have 3-4 days of printing per week, but it's likely to kind of kill you. And then the fumes, and then when you cure the t-shirts and they print everything water based, but I have no extractor, it's still fairly basic. But over the years, I've printed like hundreds of t-shirts for people, for myself, and then eventually, about 2 years ago now, I just got a bit bored of printing. And when I was living in Peckham, when I moved in to London, I was living with my friend Suzanne, that's now in Brussels, and she studied women's wear, LCF, and she later worked for Molly Goddard and Martin Rose and pretty big names from the industry, and she's kind of like got me into that. She was like working on her collection, final collections and things, and she helped me put a kind of one-piece suit together, and with my pattern onto it. And I was like, wow, this is volumes. This is not where I come from. I come from really two-dimensional artworks, graphics, computer-based stuff, painting, drawing. Nothing's got like depth, what I mean? And so patterns was the first feelings of having my brain overheating. I was like, fucking hell, like you
think of things in 3D and like how it fits together without seeing any of the fit,
literally
like the
folds and darts and like you have to hold things with pins and stuff, which I still hate. I don't really use but yeah, that was my first feeling of volumes and folding things together and giving them some sort of depth and physical presence. So I started really small, and then I was like, fuck, this is so small, so intricate. And I had domestic machine, and yeah, it was really tricky, really hard, and you need so much resilience to learn how to sew by yourself, because you're gonna sew and unpick so many seams, like so many times, and thread and little things, and you're gonna sweat, and you're gonna punch through your fingers, and it's a big challenge to learn how to sew. Yeah. But when you start putting your first things together, and you've measured things right, and your seam allowance is right, and you've learned how to add a zipper, and oh my god, like this is, at the end of the day, I was making a print, I was like, this is cool, but there's a point you're gonna reach some sort of, not mastering, but you're gonna have it in hand. You know what I mean? Then like sewing, I feel like tailoring and fashion design really is pretty endless. How far you can go. And I think with that in mind, I was not so interested into clothes. So I think the motorway of fashion design is not that attractive to me. But accessories was really, again, like kind of feeding into my interests, for graffiti, for cycling. I've always been cycling a lot, and kind of streetwear, but also like the people I had around me, and the feedback I had. And, you know, I was not studying fashion, I was studying graphics. Friends had interest in fashion, but it was very practical. It was kind of utilitarian, and it was like, so I was like, hey, I actually do need bags. You know, I need a bag where I can, you know, have my phone close to my ears because I'm cycling and I don't want to have my headphones on. And, you know, all of these kind of daily use were informing things that were like slowly kind of coming together. And yeah, and when I was still sharing the studio, I went to the countryside, found this sewing machine, like entry level Juki, that's still right there. In the countryside, like took a zip car, drove like 2.5 hours, like out the zip zone, and like got charged for it and
Just
stuff.
don't stop because I've cut the car off.
Exactly.
Keep going.
And I arrived at this like granny's shed, and she had this Juki, you know, standing there. It was a bit rusty at the time, but like pretty unused, really. It was just sitting there since so long, and picked it up, and it was the really first thing. And then my friend Suzanne came to London. We did a jacket together. My friend Lou came to London. We did a wool vest out of like wool blankets together. And that was the very first like kind of, you know, projects where I was like, fuck, this is, I can make things, but I can also like make things in like small quantities, reusing already existing materials.
Yeah.
I don't have to go like, you know, massive and, you know, source rolls of fabric and trying to feel so kind of techie about it.
Yeah.
I can just craft things together and slowly like, you know, knowledge is going to come through, and that was so satisfying.
Because when you were making those, you weren't really thinking about like selling them in such a way, or?
Yeah, I mean, of course.
Yeah.
Because you tailor things in a way where, you know,
someone else could wear it.
Yeah, fully. And I think that's always been in my mind for whatever I've been kind of doing, is I want someone to see quality in this. You know, I don't really want to do a print on a tee or on a piece of paper that's like misregistered, or that's obviously it's going to happen, but I want things to be durable. And so of course that was like part of the process, and I wanted, you know, that to be one of the core kind of element of what I'm trying to build. You know, durability and quality.
You kind of said about using like upcycled things, like finding different fabrics and remaking stuff. Like, why do you enjoy that approach? Kind of like you were saying before we started, like with the black fabric behind us, it's not perfect, but you can just figure out in that way and just like use things, or go in, like you said, you found the guy on eBay that was selling like the rolls of fabric, and you're like really interested in just exploring in that way rather than just like everything being perfect. I don't really know where I'm going with this question, but like,
I think it's also like, again, coming from a very small place that has almost no kind of large scale industry and no offcuts, no scraps, no, like Switzerland is very small. You know, it's I think 8 million people, about the same size as London. The UK is 68. So when you arrive in a place like here and you search for something on Google, it can literally be at your door in 24 hours. Which is kind of high expectations, you know. It's like the kid that wants everything right now. But it satisfies creative impulse.
You can have an idea and by tomorrow you can have the fabric and like be started doing it by 3 p.m. rather than maybe in Switzerland you got to order it. It takes a week to come. You've lost the energy. You're on to something else, kind of in that way.
On the other hand, as in Switzerland, you'd find a lot of things in the street. Great things in the street. Here, what you find in the street is either heavy, made out of concrete, either like locked. And, you know, it's very rare to find like good materials like for free here and there. Like, or just like, you know, it'd be out there for an hour and then gone. But what I'm saying is like, eBay is huge. Up north, you've got so many factories of just things in general. Like, you can find so many things online, and you know, and go to places.
Yeah.
I think this is
Do
like
you enjoy that process of like going and
I'm
seeing
in love
like the
with that
factories
process.
and things? Yeah.
If I could do that all day, I would.
Yeah.
And you know, when you came to like kind of build the space I was in before, and over time shape it in a way that would feel the most efficient for me, and you know, have storage facilities and stuff, and then move to here, I think it really feeds into this idea of like sourcing, making, building. You know, there are times I'm like, actually, I just want to build spaces for people.
Yeah.
I want to source things for people.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just like looking at the final thing because I want and I need to turn these objects and these materials into something to sell or to promote, you know, what I'm doing here. Yeah. But maybe this is actually what I truly love, and that's why I'm joking about like, oh yeah, I just want to build a house because this involves everything. And you know, there's this house in this building in Japan that these guys have been building by hand for 15 years, and I think everything can come together. You can do anything with scraps even. It's just a matter of time. Yeah. And I think today industrial scale doesn't allow things to be, you know, to come to life in a slower pace. I think everything needs to be on an Excel sheet, knowing exactly who your supplier is and who your supplier is going to be for the next 3 years. And, you know, it's like that feeds into the stability of a business. But every time I was like, oh, I'm using this fabric that I've sourced and I might run out. And then like, I eventually run out and then I like go on eBay and like, there's this new thing that literally just came out and dude lives in Bow in London. And you know what I mean? It's like, you always get lucky. Yeah. You know, and of course you rely on this, and there's still a lot of, you know, fabric manufacturers and factories and, you know, that will provide people that need huge amounts of fabric. But as someone that just, you know, a one-man kind of thing that does everything from visual production to hoovering to drilling to making the bags and printing for people, it's great. Yeah. It's just the scale. It's like, hey, I've got my cargo bike. I'm going to go pick up this raw fabric that's about 35 kilos. I can't really have much more on the front of my cargo bike anyways. Down the road. Exactly. So, you know, it's like...
Someone steps out, you just keep, I'm going. I can't stop.
It's great. And like, you know, it's like technical fabric and it comes through the post and it's just like heavy enough for me to, you know, it's 40 meters or 35 meters. Yeah. But that's actually just enough for me now. Yeah.
How many bags could you make from that?
Depends on the bag. Yeah. I think like a decent bag would take you about a meter. Okay. The roll on that one is only 91 wide. Usually standard size about 148. Yeah. But yeah, a meter. Nice. A bit more. Yeah. And that's what's great about bags. Yeah. It's quite intricate. It uses a lot more fabric than you think, but a lot less than clothes. Yeah. Because clothes, you know, sleeves and, you know, you unfold pieces of clothing. This is huge amounts of fabric. Like
doubles and doubles.
Exactly, and then grading, and then, you know.
So you've been working on a lot of bags recently, I think you were saying.
Yeah, it really has been the tunnel. For what reason, I'm not sure. I
guess it's quite contained. Like
it really
bag isn't as big as a table. It's like you can see it from all angles without moving your head. Yeah. But there's so many different. Like a lot of these are kind of like over the shoulder, but then obviously you've got like hiking bags. You've got like just small bags, like little bags for like bike riding and stuff. Yeah, yeah. Or just like bum bags.
Like shoulder bags. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And this little one here, this guy, well, this took quite a bit of time to kind of engineer. Yeah. But we've released this one. I had an assistant working with me, Finn McCarthy. In like early this year, like February to kind of June. And by now, I did like, 150 of those now? Yeah. So, you know, just hand sewing by myself. Finn helps me to cut some of them. We went to visit factory up in Sheffield's. Like, it was really like the start of, it's so basic, you know, construction's really simple. It's not even lined because it's such heavy materials. It's just, you know, it's bound to the idea of like practicality and, you know, daily use. And it really has done that job. Like some people have bought it, worn it for like a year, every day, and it's beaten up, but it's still there, and it hasn't ripped, it hasn't, you know. And I think that was the really first thing. I was like, hey, I don't think someone can wear a jacket of made every day for a year, you know, because it's a jacket. No one wants to wear the same jacket every day, and I'm not good enough to kind of work on such big pieces of fabric and then stock and then size and then the fit, and everyone's got body types.
Yeah,
and,
it's like you've got one size of that.
Exactly.
Of,
and I've like literally sold this to mums, to 16 years olds, to like, to everyone. Like the range is just so wide that I was like, whoa, this is kind of interesting.
Yeah. If you sell those on a market, you do a market, don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, yeah, a market stand.
Yeah. So
in the real world.
In the real world.
Out there.
Yeah, and so learning so much through just making them, I was like, actually, I feel like the people that buy the most are the people that like, you know, understand, that I've met, that came to the studio, that touch the bags, that like kind of understand what I'm after here, beyond the product. It's like the making, the vision, the kind of the passion behind it.
You're buying
really.
into that person.
Yeah, and you love to buy from people that like what they've made, because you know this product's gonna last. You know that, you know, if there's love behind something, you're gonna enjoy a meal that someone's done with love.
Yeah.
You're not gonna enjoy a meal that someone has whacked in a pan. You know what I mean? It's like, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's like I've spent enough hours on this to, yes, sometimes be bored, but to be like, I've got it in hand, like, you know what I mean? It's like, this is a product I love, and this is a product, like, this is something, some kind of baby, you know what I mean? It's like true love for it, and dedication, and, you know, resilience and passion, all of these things. But it's like, it's
and we're
almost
just talking about a bag as well.
It's getting romantic for sure. But it is a bit of a romance, you know, like, I'm kind of living the dream.
You're channeling your energy onto something, and you want it to be good if you're doing.
Yeah.
No matter what you're doing, if you're putting energy into.
Yeah,
like
luckily I like it.
Yeah.
You know, like there are so many fashion designers and bag designers that don't even know how to sew.
Yeah.
You know, and you go to bag designers' offices now. You know, they've got a department doing cloth 3D and you know, rendering things on a computer and then shipping it to factory. Factory makes the bag, returns the bag to the designer. Designer looks at it, amends the tech pack, sends it back, say, hey, I want this pocket here, this placement here, that trimming to change. It's a non-physical world. And coming from a place that is two-dimensional, my mind, you know what I mean? Like my visual projection of images and color schemes, and I don't learn that way. I learn through making it.
Yeah.
And
do
so
you
that's
do much
why,
like sketching and stuff, or do you just kind of
not
go,
even that much?
like,
Yeah. I mean, obviously there's
out?
loads of, you know, influence from references and archives, and I love to, you know, thrift and go to fleas and car boots and things. But this is like how all the brands work now. You know, designers just, you know, work with references and inform themselves. But at the end of the day, you know, you can be influenced by 100 artists. If you're a good illustrator, a good designer, you're gonna draw in a way that's gonna be yours. And I believe that for everything, you know, we were talking about cooking before. You can do a spaghetti risotto and like you know, anything. If it comes from like, you know, the taste of a mum's food, you know what I mean? It's like that kind of feeling. It's like, regardless of what the mum has done, it's all gonna taste the mum's taste. You know what I mean? It's like, it's very
the energy. There's an energy.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so, and that's why I kind of believe, without being the mum of the bags here, it's kind of what I believe in. It's and that's why markets are great, because, like, you know, I come from this making everything myself and learning through making, and being informed by materials and textures and touch and smell and all of these things, very physical. I think that promoting them through a physical experience, like a store, like a market store, and then showing people, they would understand me because they've got me in front of them, and then they understand the work because they've got the bag in their hands. So for me, like, ticks all the boxes around selling in the most kind of confident climate. You know, it's like, I'm not lying about anything.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Also, I guess interesting like that. because you do it on like Brick Lane. You do one on Brick Lane and one on like Portobello Road.
Yeah.
Like the amount of people, like the footfall is like obviously amazing.
Yeah.
But then just like a general mix of people. It's not just like people that knew you from graffiti or whatever. Like a really like niche community of people that might want a bag. Yeah. It is. Yeah. You got the 13-year-old kid that wants something at school to the grandma that's maybe buying it for the 13-year-old kid, but like it's like a really wide range of like feedback, like initial feedback before they've even bought it, and just like interaction.
And it's the street. It's outdoor.
Yeah.
Which is really tough. Which means my price point is really low.
Yeah.
Which means people haggle, people bargain, people, you know, chat shit about it, being like, why is it so expensive? When like literally you've done 60% off on like your online prices.
Yeah.
But it's the truth. It's like, you know, it's the best way to understand your target audience. It's so real. It's a bit hostile sometimes. Market a bit difficult when you set up at 8 in the morning on a Sunday morning. It's cold, and you got you know, Brick Lane. You know you got the regulars, like the, you know, everyone kind of that's had a rough night, and it's kind of messy sometimes. But at the end of the day, you know, young, got the energy, got the feeling for it, got the drive. I don't think you can do market your whole life. You know, I'm surrounded by traders that have been doing that for 15, 20 years that, yes, have a nice van, and yes, have a car in like Enfield, a house in Enfield or something. It's possible to live from doing markets, you know, but it's outdoors, you know, it's tough. And you can see like someone's face that's worked in an office, and someone's face. Oh my God, like, you know, and it's tough. It's tough, and it's waking up early. It's saying no to friends on Saturday evening when everyone's going out, and you have to go to bed because you have to be fresh in the morning. And if you're not going to be selling because you're not approachable.
You're sitting there on your phone.
Exactly.
Just trying to say, well,
but at the end of the day, if that's the price to pay now I mean, you'd even say the price to pay. It's like, you know, I'm making what I love, and I'm selling what I love. Making, so I guess, you know, it's kind of living the dream really, but yeah, I think markets and don't get me wrong, like it's not always good. You've got good days, and you've got days where I've literally
sold nothing.
I drove to Portobello Market, Notting Hill, and like literally just sold barely anything. And you've lost money because you pay for your pitch, because you pay for the gas, because you spend a day away from making more things and designing more things, and that choice is really hard to make. And it's like, you know, we're in November now. Next month is Christmas. It's meant to be peak time for sales. You know, am I doing Portobello on Friday and Saturday and Brick Lane on Sunday with the little stock I've got now, or do I engineer more things and then just like produce as much for December as possible so I have a wider range to sell? You know,
do you worry about stuff like that? Is that?
Oh yeah, that's like
in
weekly.
your mind the whole time,
that's weekly. And you know, these guys, these little bags, the robust one, you know, make like 15 every 2 weeks, and it just sells. And I'm like, if I want to go like kind of money, I need to make some more. But if I want to satisfy my creative drive and kind of stay out the water, head out the water financially, I also need to make others. Because you just, you know,
do like the screen printing job.
Exactly.
Like the bigger jobs for
exactly.
Like,
so, but that's the reality of, you know, of freelancing and having your own thing, and I guess you know it too. You know, it goes in waves always. And when you think it's going to go bad forever, it actually ends up being good. And when it's too good, you're like, oh, I kind of need some time off.
Can this end?
Yeah,
or
literally.
Will it ever end?
So, because I want to have a bit of fun, and you know. But no, feedback so far is pretty mind blowing.
Nice.
And yeah, like, I think there's nothing more satisfying than feeling like you learn. You know, it's like.
It seems like you just love like learning stuff.
Oh
like,
yeah.
Whether it is like plumbing in the sink, like when you bought the sink, or just like any of those things. Like it's not just fixed to one thing. Yeah, like 3 sewing machines, all for different purposes, but just like figuring them out seems like you really enjoy that.
Yeah, and I guess you learn from making things, but also from like interacting with people. And I guess this is also, you know, what we are doing now. And having a conversation is learning from each other too. It's like, hey, this actually, everything you do really on the daily and everything you do in life, I'm pretty sure like, you know, feeds into decision making and you know, inspires you and you learn and I think we should really trust our instinct as like humans, you know, like I think sometimes we have too many sort of boundaries or we think we can't
it's like
do
self-imposed,
this.
isn't it?
Yeah, like we can't do that. Oh, how am I going to do this? I'm not going to fix that. Like, you know, radiators and boiler issues and plumbing and toilets and, you know, lift, unscrew, you know, shake.
I think it's quite unique though to like have that, to be able to think about fixing things.
Yeah,
I don't think that many people do. Obviously, there's millions of people.
It's a financial thing as well. Like
that.
sometimes I'm like, why would I call someone to help with this when I can literally try to sort it out myself?
Yeah, just YouTube it and then you can figure it out. And
exactly.
You buy the screw and it fixes.
Exactly. Yeah.
But I think that's quite unique to be able to have that mindset of just like, okay, I'm a bit bored with the sewing today. I can go and do the screen printing, like your energy's just continuously going, or I'm just gonna do some painting, or go for a bike ride in that way. But just figuring out how things work, I think is an amazing like skill to have.
Yeah.
Like the energy to and the.
I don't think you actually like. Yeah. I don't think I actually ever realized that this is. You know, I just think that everyone could do.
Yeah.
And I think this applies to.
Do people come to you when they want to fix something? Like, would you be the person that is like, how do I solve this?
We've had a funny, I mean, it's just an anecdote, and it's really bound to the space we're in now. When I was still in Unit 10, my friend Toby, it was like on a Saturday night or something, and I'm really off and around, like, even at night and stuff. And and I remember that I was in the studio, always headphones on, like kind of noise cancelling in my bubble, and like Toby runs into the studio and he's like, hey, calm down. There's like there's a flooding. and I come down, I'm like, what the fuck's going on? And basically like the hot feed of the water to the sink just like snapped open. And he was just like pouring on the floor. Up to the point it was like going in the corridor and stuff. And I was like, I was seeing the end. I was like, you know, this is going to last for a few hours.
Yeah.
You know, Saturday night, who the fuck's going to pick up? We're calling management wouldn't pick up. And obviously Saturday night, everyone's busy kind of thing. And then obviously there is always, you know, you can cut the feed of any tap. And it was just a matter of finding that screw. And Toby like ran to me because he knew I was like, beyond knowing how to fix it, I had no clue, like, you know what I mean? But I had the interest to get wet for it, you know? I was like, he knew I had the screwdrivers, he knew I had the things to like potentially put an end to this thing. And it feels so basic as an event, but I just arrived down there and I was like, right, this, that, like the screw here, undo that, like, you know, take the screwdriver, cut it off, we cut it off. It's fine. Yeah. And then we just mopped it out, and it was
someone
sorted.
else would just be panicking for like hours, like just putting toilet roll on it, or just like I'm just gonna walk away from this. I think it is definitely a skill to be able to figure things out, and also in a stressful situation.
Yeah, and it was like, I don't know, it was rewarding to feel like he came to me for an issue.
Thank you.
I was like, this is great. Like, is that the reputation I've got? Like fixing leaks.
There you go.
Love it.
Nice. So the bags you've been working, do you like do like kind of, I guess, like drops or like collections in that way, or do you not? Have you done that in the past and kind of shied away from it, or?
Yeah.
Obviously, like fashion is very like seasonal and
very organised.
Is that not how you kind of really think of it?
It is, but practically it's not the way it's happened. And I'm still learning about those things. You know, pacing things, and I spoke about time management earlier. Like, it's something I'm really like learning through, and I'm really day-to-day kind of life. I like to plan, but I do things very like naturally, and I feel like my best ideas and my best projects have, you know, come out like kind of right before falling asleep, and like trying to, you know, wake back up and be like, oh yeah, like let's get this done. Exactly. And bags are the same thing. Like, you know, it's like midnight and I'm like, oh yeah, I'm kind of tired, I'm gonna go home. And then suddenly you've got this idea and you work something out until like 4 a.m. And this is the greatest thing you've done this month. And I believe in that sort of spontaneous thing, then that's really far from the reality of marketing and commercializing a product. So this is something that I'm working through now, and obviously working towards a drop for Christmas in December. The prototypes are worked out. I've finished now 3 different bags that are going to be in 3 different colors, and then the idea is to work more towards, at least for online, made to order, to limit kind of production loss and and waste.
Is that because you maybe make stuff and it's just like not sitting on the shelf, but you just got it here?
Everything sells over time.
Yeah,
honestly, I've got no stock. T-shirts, yes, like you can tell. Garments and clothes, like there are some models, some colors, some fits that go faster. Bags, like literally what I've got is prototypes. There's no storage. Which is pretty amazing. And then talking about loss and waste, I'm also working towards a project that was partly funded from Pro Helvetia, so the Fund for Culture in Switzerland. After an application. It's the first one, pretty major for me. Like, don't think I've been funded much. I actually never really received, or I've applied for the Arts Council funding for Develop Your Own Practice like 2 times. I think both times got refused. So it's come through, and this is very early stage still, and it's to do with like waste fabric and discarded dead stock. Dead stock, I'm trying to make bags with it because it's still like decent quantities, but when it comes to scraps and offcuts that are too small to be turned into a patchwork or an actual piece of fabric, I'm working towards something that's mixing sewing, stitching, and waste fabric to kind of recreate a new material. And this is a very slow-paced project that I'm kind of keeping to myself for now, because it obviously has industrial applications as well, and pretty huge potential. And there is so much interest around those things now that it is also like a trending thing, but it's the reality of, again, me working with my materials, realizing that right in front of you there is a pile of small pieces of fabric that I don't really know what to do with. So I was like, hey, I'm gonna start working something out to make fabric again in much smaller quantities, but that I make sure that what I've got in the bin is literally the finest pieces and the unused of the unused. And I think working with wood, you probably have very similar issues. And I love the little box downstairs, trying to people
do ask me that, have you got an offcut like the size of this desk? I'm like,
literally, I mean, a lot of things, no, but like a lot of things like you see, like you're standing here is actually like being supported by some of your offcuts. Under there is like mostly your offcuts and stuff. And it comes into use, but again, I think this is something that we should really learn from, and really downscaling things helps saving so much.
There's so much waste just in everything. I mean, even like here, like the bin outside, I'm just like, I get so annoyed sometimes when I put stuff in the bin. Everyone's putting stuff in the bin, but I'm just like, why is there cardboard in this bin? This isn't the cardboard bin.
But, no, and you see massive chunks, like you see big bits, and the bigger the scale, the less people have got time to save. And this is really something that we should kind of learn and evolve on, I think.
It's very frustrating.
Because there's so much, and there's slowly and soon there's going to be like smaller kind of entities providing certain practices in communities with things they need. Food waste is one, materials, and there's no waste in knowledge, sadly. But I guess putting everything to use is something that in a lot of countries are still like prevailing, like using things until they really crack and are ripped to death, what I mean? But it's really something that we should work on, and I think I'm trying with obviously a bit of help.
Yeah.
Because this is very non-profitable for now, and dedicating time and
Does it have,
material and
so
effort.
with the grant, does it have like a final, like is it like a 2-year thing? Like a final deadline, like an output of some kind?
Pretty much 6 months.
Okay.
But it's been more than 6 months by now.
Yeah.
It started in March. And I should be further than I am now. But it's definitely on the right path.
Yeah.
Application scale, and it's still very experimental, and I've been funded for the concept stage, so not even for prototyping. So it's helping to develop the idea and see market application and competitors and all of these things.
Yeah.
So it needs also like a lot of research and a bit of field research, but it's still connected to bags, and that's what I want to use it for. So I'd say yes, early next year.
Okay.
But then there might be another like 6 months stage of actual prototyping, putting it into use. But yeah, it's on the right path.
Yeah,
for sure.
How like you said, you weren't very academic, so like those processes of like applying for money.
Yeah.
Like, do you find that really hard? Like, is it really like I've got to sit down and really focus?
Yeah.
On it? Like even with like the Arts Council that you mentioned.
So working until July, kind of as a civil servant, part time, and I was like a lot of project managing, and I kind of got hired into that job, not really expecting to be hired into that job. So
you accepted me.
Yeah. And so, so yeah, I think it's throughout this experience that I got put on the task of timelines, budget,
So
communication,
again,
project
like learning
managing.
something else.
Yeah. But project managing is like, that was unrelated to kind of my practice and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was still like a 3 days a week kind of thing, so it was taking a lot of my time. But at the same time, without wanting to learn and without kind of enjoying the job, it would kind of grind you. And it kind of did, trying to juggle with printing and commissions and making bags and working and going to markets over weekends and stuff.
Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons, obviously, why I left. But this has really helped me, putting things together. And I always tell to friends and people applying to grants and residencies and projects in general, putting thoughts and ideas on the paper is so helpful, because it helps you, like, even just the Arts Council project of trying to pitch something to them and ask for some money. It's really going to help you like gather thoughts and research and numbers around something that you want to get done. And so many times you've got so many ideas.
You're getting out of your head.
Exactly, and
like,
you're pretty
you're
sure.
just like hearing yourself say it, and you're like, oh yeah, that.
Yeah, and business models nowadays, like some people start businesses with like millions of investment, and I've got a kind of running business with no investment. I mean, it's like so I think with interesting ideas and a lot of energy and no limit to hours to work, it is kind of possible.
Yeah.
For how long, to which scale this is going to go, etc., etc. Like, I've got no clue.
Yeah.
I haven't really got like a business plan for the next 5 years.
Do you feel you need something like that, or are you okay with not having that?
I think to reassure a lot of people, I'd need one. But as the only one that's at risk here is me.
Yes.
I don't need one.
No. I'm the same in that way.
Yeah, exactly.
You think, oh, maybe it'd be good to have something, but I don't know what that would even be.
Yeah.
So like, but maybe that's for me. Maybe that's like a fear in some way.
And I think I'm a bit against, like, not against, but like someone asked me why I was so angry against like the industry or like the big brands and like entities that do it the right way, with like marketing campaigns and collections 2 years in advance and like so much planning that it freezes something so romantic about it. You know what I mean? Like the idea of raw intention and local production.
Well, if you know you've got to
Building
make 500 of those for January 2027, you're
Yeah,
like, okay, well,
it's doable though.
yeah, but like but then something else comes in, like another interesting project where
but then
someone wants to make tents with you or something.
fully,
Like,
but then if I get paid
makes
for those 500, then I hire.
True, okay.
And I think that's
that's
my
the 5-year plan.
Yeah, but that's my kind of limit as well. It's like I haven't got quite the stability to hire anyone.
Yeah.
And I have really high expectations by my products because what I'm doing is my identity.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess the same as you
Yeah.
want to make sure you're talking to me about that project of cutting things yourself or getting them cut. If they cut it bad, then your reputation is at risk, and your reputation is everything right now.
Yeah.
You haven't got, I mean, it's like,
or you should spend the money on the material again. So it's not even at the point where someone's seeing it.
Yeah.
Like someone could be here and they could cut it all wrong, and you're like,
but
well, now I've got to redo that kind of thing. But
fully,
yeah.
But then there's the saying, no one cares as much as you do.
No.
So I think it's, that's also
even if someone puts 50% in as much as you are.
Yeah.
That's enough.
And I think for us, like, into like craftsmanship and like, it's we pay attention to some details that no one cares about. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, this is cracked, this has got scratched, this has got this and that. We're gonna trash the thing. Like sometimes I misprint one thing, there's not a fraction of a second happens, I bin it straight away because the quickest it is out of sight, the quicker I like forget about it, the quicker I can move on. If I'm like, otherwise, I need to correct this and like change that and order. You know what I mean? It's like, nah, let's get things right now.
Yeah.
And so, you satisfy customer needs. You're happy about your work. It's like, I think further down, maybe you can compromise around these things. But, it's a well-crafted thing is my business card. If it's good and if it handles time, if someone wears it for 2 years, then, it's a golden business card.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like,
its job. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like, and I want that.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing best than like a customer being satisfied about the product they bought, and like, oh yeah, like 5 years time and 10 years time and 20 years time.
Still using the bag.
Yeah, exactly.
Still walking around with it.
So yeah.
Maybe just like kind of wrap up there, but like, how does like having like just a bigger space like to yourself, how do you feel that will like evolve things for you? Like I think even when you were, I remember like when you came, you kept like looking in at the space, and I was like, he's definitely going to take it, because you're like, every day you're like looking in, you're like sitting in here, seeing what's going on, like, oh yeah, maybe I could do this, and like just seeing that excitement in someone is like really nice in that way. But like I think you mentioned maybe about doing like workshops and like bringing people in. Like, is that something you've got like in your mind to kind of do in that way, or have you been able to even like take on like bigger commissions that you wouldn't have been able to do in the last space? Maybe just in a bit more space, like freedom in that way. I don't know.
I mean, it's also the reality of moving into this space, which is more expensive.
Yeah.
And I think this is the biggest burden of working in London.
Yeah.
It's how expensive and how grinding spaces can be. I wish there was more opportunities to kind of have warehouses and build collectives and work all together around some stuff, with pros and cons, and we spoke about it in the past. Noise and fumes and smell, and and not everyone's got the same idea of what sharing a space should be. But yeah, beyond the kind of financial pressure of having such space, the idea was to also be more physical, because I think that feeds into me talking about presenting the bags before and doing markets. And I really believe, especially in a highly technical world that we're living in now, with the tech and stuff having such huge impact, and I think putting forward physical relationship with things, but also with each other. And me moving to Peckham 8 years ago and talking about it gentrifying and evolving in a good and a bad way, and I think this is also something I kind of owe to the area, like welcoming people around and allowing curiosity to happen. I've worked with Croydon Council recently, doing printing workshops with kids, uh, making a mural in collaboration with Europa Graphic Design Studio and Carver Haggard architects. So this was, yeah, these are projects that are like close to my heart because you get other people involved, and it's not so much like yes passion, yes you cooking this and that and still having the same taste. You know what I mean? It's like it's not so self-centered anymore. It's like, right, I'm transmitting something I love that not everyone's gonna love, but that maybe 2 people out of 20 are gonna love.
Yeah.
And I'm having such an impact for those 2 people.
Yeah, they'll remember you.
They'll remember not only me, but like themselves.
Yeah.
You know, they'll see themselves making some things that they liked, that they appreciated, that they got inspired from. And I think, yeah, the format, and I'm going to try to start that in 2025, is maybe like a monthly workshop. And the idea is to, now that we've got space to kind of walk and, yeah.
Again, not crabbing around.
Yeah, well, you'd be surprised because, I tidied up before you came in, but, there are days you can't really walk. But yeah, the idea is to welcome about 4 people around and ideally have like 3 paying for their slots, and then the 4th person comes in for free.
Yeah.
So it means you can kind of allow different people, or people with even no interest into what you're doing, but allow that to happen. And over the years, I've had multiple, inquiries about printing small quantities of T-shirts, or even people that are like too young to afford printing T-shirts because it is still, especially hand pulled and locally based and stuff, it is still, an expensive process to do and to commission. And so I think workshops is the good kind of bridge to help people produce in lower quantities, but also understand.
Yeah, they're like part of the process.
Fully, and you can go so far with that. You can, you can have youths and students and young people and sort of like have projects that are more community targeted, and you can have also very corporate projects, pitching to brands, printing workshops, like, how many brands and designers are now working for brands, but they've never seen a screen printing process going on.
Yeah.
And so they design T-shirts, but they've never actually printed a T-shirt. And so I think this is really like, I want to make this whole thing a bit more fluid, and a bit more like kind of, all right, let's come through, let's discuss, let's, interact.
It's not just a factory, just
exactly, and yeah, get creative, hands-on. Nice. So yeah, that's the whole point of this new space, is to be even more creative, but allow more stuff to happen as well. Because in the previous one, it was just me, myself, and I, and literally 0 room to have anyone coming through.
Yeah, I remember when we moved this table, which is an insane table to move anywhere.
Yeah,
it should just be in a fabrication shop. And I was like, whoa, there's so much stuff in here. It was crazy.
I emptied it.
But I mean, it's even interesting. Like, you moved here before I did, and like we only had a conversation like 6 months or whatever it is now, like 6 months ago, and we're in like the same car park, and like lived in the same area. It's like, imagine how many other people around here that don't know. Like, I talk to people like build furniture in people's houses, and they don't even know this place is here. And they've like lived in this area for years, like lived in Dulwich or wherever. So, and then you're like, oh yeah, there's like breweries, there's people doing T-shirts, there's guys selling this thing. It's like amazing in that way.
And there's so much potential, and I mean, that's something we approached as well, like us two kind of collaborating on something in the future. And I guess the bags and printing is not the limit for me. I like, and I'm not really joking when I'm saying that I'd like to build my house. It's like, you need so much knowledge for that, but at the same time, it's all a matter of like pace, and then if you know the right people, then you can get the right tips and the right feedback and the right sort of, all right, let's just spend a couple of days. I do this for you, you do that for me, and you know what I mean? Like, it's a trading process at the end of the day, and I think that's what we should see more of as well. So yeah, hopefully we can make a store. We can make something that mixes fabric and ply, and work something out nice together.
Nice.
Be fun.
Cool. Good place to end.
Cool.
Sweet. Yeah, that was really good.
Nice.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Great. Another one in the bag. Hopefully you made it all the way to the end. Again, feeling very inspired listening back to this one. I hope you are too. You can find more about what Tanguy is creating on his website, varylab.co, or at varylab on Instagram. You can buy his clothes and bags from the website, or in person at Brick Lane or Portobello Road markets on the weekends. Don't forget that there's a series of photos from his studio space on the website, and you can find the links for that below, but it is a collection of .info/spaces. If you would like to be involved in this series, please get in touch with me via email or Instagram. We'd really love to kind of come and meet you. Hopefully some of you are out there. Hopefully some of you are listening. Hopefully some of you want to meet me. Thanks again for listening, and see you next month. Over and out.